Welcome to the Synthesizer Olympics. So tonight, you guys are going to be voting on what the best synthesizers of the year are in a bracket tournament style format. So what is that? So we're going to have 5 different categories. We're going to start off with budget value analog monosynths under $700. Then we're going to go to workhorse polysynths under $1,000. We're going to jump up to contender analog polysynths under $2,000. And then we've got our high-end hybrid synthesizers under $3,500. And then finally, we're going to get to the heavyweight flagship synthesizers, which are $3,500 and up. And so the way this is going to work is we're going to start with 2 synths out of the category. And you guys in the chat are going to have a minute to vote on which synthesizer you want to go for. So in this example, we're going to start with our first 2 synths, right? So get ready. There's going to be a lot of voting in the chat tonight. Our first 2 synths of the evening are the PWM Malevolent versus the Behringer MS5. So that's their recreation of the Roland SH5 vintage synthesizer. And so you guys can refresh your memories about what these synths sound like. Why don't we go ahead and check out some demos from the respective channels. So this is the PWM Malevolent.
For years, there's been a hardcore fan base of the original, bleeding online to bring it back to life. And I can totally see why. It's definitely got a character all to its own. And now, finally, we have a deservedly fully analog version of this amazing vintage synthesizer, resurrected and at a price point that won't involve remortgaging your car.
Okay. Can I get a
Yes, so you've more than likely guessed the MS5 is
for a 50,000 subscriber special technical difficulties. Cheers, guys. Okay, so that's been more than enough time. And you guys have voted. 78% of you guys said that the PWM Malevolent was the better way to go on that. So what we're going to do is jump back to the brackets here. And the winner is the cheaper by $10 PWM Malevolent. And now let's go ahead and do our next comparison. Okay, so this is going to be the Base Station Swifty Edition versus the Moog Messenger. So sorry for the technical difficulties, guys. So jumping in here. Weirdly, this is a vertical video. I think there's going to be a lot of bias tonight, but that's okay. If I want to know what you guys think of the best things. let's compare that with the Messenger. And I've got these videos just from the respective synth companies. Another 30 seconds, let's say, and then we have to finish the vote. So 30 seconds on the clock now. So if you haven't voted yet, get that vote in. Billy Barcody, I don't know the answer to that actually. I didn't know that. How's it going, Keith? That's 30 seconds on the clock. So we're going to stop it there. And let's see what you guys said. Y'all said 52% said Base Station 2. The first upset of the night. I was not expecting that at all. I don't know what I was expecting. But it was not that. So going back to the brackets here. The winner is the Base Station 2 with 52%. Now we can see that our bracket, we've knocked out the MS5 and the Messenger. So now we're going to vote on the Malevolent versus the Base Station 2. So I'm going to drop that in the chat right now. And you guys are going to let me know. I'm going to give you guys a full minute from when it drops in the chat. So Malevolent versus Base Station 2. It is officially in the chat right now. So this is the determining factor for best analog monosynth of the year under $700. 1 minute on the clock right now. And can I get a scum cheers in the chat? Oh my God. For me, I think Messenger's very cool. And I guess I can talk about it because it's already knocked out of the tournament. I would not have guessed it. The fact that you've got resonance compensation on a Moog synth, meaning that it can actually retain bass, that hasn't been done before. And it also has all the wave folding and stuff, sort of like a Mavis sort of situation. 20 seconds left on the clock. Thank you guys so much for the scum cheers. So it's interesting. And I can increase my voiceover. Here we go. I'm going to turn that up a bit. And I'll turn the background sound down just a little bit there. There we are. So that was our minute on the clock. And you guys said 64%, 67% of you guys said the PWM Malevolent. So the winner is the Malevolent. And takes the whole crown as the analog synth of the year, which makes sense. And you know what's crazy? It was the cheapest one of all of them at $549. I really don't think there's better value than the Malevolent. I'm just shocked that we've got knocked out already. All right, so now we are going to move on to our next bracket. So this is our workhorse Polysynths under $1,000 bracket. And our first go around is going to be the Waldorf Protein for $399 versus the Arturia Mini Freak for $599. So again, we're voting on what's the best synth. A proxy to that might be what synth would you rather have, but also what's the best synth. Not necessarily what's the best synth for the price, you know? Check out our friend, the Mini Freak. Now there's a $200 difference, but you guys voted for the cheapest synth in the first category, which is really fascinating. By the way, we're going to have 2 hybrid synths, 2 digital synths, and 2 analog synths in this category. So it's going to be interesting to see how that fits into things as well. And that's right, Synthsonic. These are recent synths. There's not going to be any vintage synths in this one, although I did consider throwing a few dark horses in. All right, so let's jump over here. I love that it's suggesting my own video. That's funny. So, Waldorf Protein versus the Mini Freak. And 76% of you guys preferred the Mini Freak, which I'm not terribly surprised by, just because it's a little bit more of a fully... Oh, I need to start the tournament here. Start the tournament. There we go. And now we can set the Mini Freak as the winner. And let's jump on to our next match here. Now, this one, this is interesting. So we have the Behringer... And we have the JN80 versus the Behringer Wave. So we've got an analog Juno 60 versus their PPG Wave clone. So let's go ahead and see what we think about that.
So get this. It's been almost 9 years since the DeepMind 12 was released. Oh. Wow, what a ride we've been on at Behringer since then. And it was, of course, based on the legendary... All right,
I'm hoping we can get some audio in here. Oh my god. Let's just hear this thing. Come on now. Oh, I think it looks small. Synths, how's it going? Bartek, oh yeah. Let's go check out the Wave. And you guys tell me what you think. How's it going? It's a cool sound. I love that you've got to have 35% external reverb to make it sound. This is a harder one. Like, you know, the JN80 is gonna, if it's like a Juno, it's a little more instant charisma type of a thing, right? All right, guys, I'm gonna cut it off in 20 seconds or so. Very tight, actually. 54% of you guys said wave. So the wave is going to progress on. And I agree with that myself personally as a sicko. I'm into it. So let's look at the bracket. So that means the Arturia Mini Freak is now going up against something new. We've got the Arturia Mini Freak versus the Korg Multi-Poly. So this is going to be interesting. This one's tough, isn't it? Let's see what you guys think. This one's tough. Zilla says it's easy. I don't think it's easy for me, if I had to say. Keith, same thing, doesn't care. He's like, this one's easy. Oh, there does seem to be a clear front runner. You guys have 30 seconds left to vote. What's in an analog filter nowadays, you guys? This is very interesting. Maybe not. I'm a little bit too of a scum snob, perhaps. Fascinating. All right. And with 83% of the vote, you guys have voted for the good old multi-poly. Which is interesting. I would not have necessarily guessed that, but I can see why for sure. And now that puts us up against the Behringer Wave against the Sequential Forum. So let's go ahead and check out how that sounds. And we'll see what you guys have to say about that. We're loading. Good point, Synth. This is not the best demo. Video, I forgot about the hand dancing, This came out around the same time as GeForce Map, and everybody hated that video as well, which I didn't think their video was that bad. It just felt like the era of disconnected synth trailer videos. thought this synth sounds a little tougher than it should. All right, and 71% of you guys went for our boy, the sequential form. Meaning our last, this is going to be interesting. Our last battle, and I'm going to put a minute on the clock. Our last battle for this under $1,000 category. Interestingly, that it's the 900 and just shy of $1,000 synth. Maybe not that interesting, but to me it is, considering you guys voted for the cheapest one on the last go round. It's in the chat now. I'm going to start 1 minute on the clock. Multi-poly versus 4M. It's sort of like, what do you want out of a synth? You know, because the 4M, for me, I always have that thing about digital filters where I'm like, if I ever doubt it, when you have an analog filter, you know it's how it should be, even though there are, of course, some sequential analog filters that I don't love. But the Korg multi-poly definitely represents like the best virtual analog there is currently, I think, for a lot of us. And so it's going to be really interesting to see what you guys think. 20 seconds left on the clock. So get your voice in. Let your voice be heard. Feel free to shoot from the hip. Answer with your heart. Yeah, the eye contact's a lot. I always refer to myself as a sicko, like a synthesizer sicko. Like I've been bit by the bug of synthesizers and have made, you know, like if you just look behind me, how much I've spent on synths, right? You know, that's like a truly depraved person would do that. 71% of you guys went for the multi-poly. Wow, I wouldn't have guessed. I genuinely would not have guessed. So looking at that, we're looking at multi-poly and then the form as definitely seems like second place, and then the mini freak and wave as options as well. So pretty interesting. So now let me just go back to a blank one here, and we're going to jump into our next category, guys. So these are contender analog polysynths under $2,000, right? So if you want to get that analog polysynth sound, and our first matchup is going to be the Behringer UBXA versus Dreadbox Artemis. And this one's interesting, right? Because of the nature of it. You would recommend the mini log instead of the forum. That's interesting. I wanted to cut this list down because like originally I had just so many on here that I wanted to keep it somewhat reasonable for us to get through in a live stream tonight. So let's start with the UBXA.
Well, it's certainly taken a long...
We gotta get past this. Let's get to some sounds. Good things come. I don't have a minute and 42 seconds to wait. Got people watching. Alistair, that's why I wanted to make sure to get some synths in under $1,000. A couple of categories. The synths have gotten so expensive. Let's go check this part out. Let's just keep going here. Hopefully we'll hear something else. We're loading. Come on now. I pay for that
VCOs per voice and dual pole and 4-pole VCFs.
I don't care. Let's go ahead to Artemis. Damien, that's funny. This one's tricky because of the form factor, isn't it? Give me that pulse width modulation. Come on now. Don't tease me. Give me the PWM. Okay. 30 FM. That's cool. Now I'm just like, where's the fucking PWM? Come on, LFO2. I see it. I don't care about the fucking noise. No one cares about the noise. Okay, 57% of you guys voted for Artemis, which is pretty cool, interesting, pretty tight. Actually, I think that might be the tightest so far. All right, actually, I have to start the tournament. I have to remember to do that. Artemis. All right, so now we are jumping over to our next contender. So this is going to be jumping up another couple $100. Oberheim TO5 versus Moog Matriarch. So this one's going to be super interesting too. So let's jump on in. I have a feeling. Oh, that's like still the best. This is how you do an ad. You crank the fucking resonance. You lay your whole cock on the table. You know what I mean? We don't need any... None of that's necessary. Your synth sounds good. Oh, it's our dwarf. Welcome. I think they sound a little different. Great demo. I wonder who did the demo and the 30 FM. I just love this song. Do they hit you with the scum filter again? They do. They do. I don't mean to be poisoning the well. But I love that they end it. They're like, just in case you forgot how good the filter resonance sounds. And the Matriarch. Also, Lisa Belladonna. Never put half a cock. Let's do another one just for fun here. And you're right, Nick, it isn't a polysynth, but I did feel like this was a cool synth that is in the neighborhood. You know, but it's paraphonic, of course, but you've got your 4 VCOs that you can play separately. Probably more comparable to something like a Forum, but I've always thought this is a very cool synth. All right, I'm gonna give you guys 15 more seconds of this. It does sound good, doesn't it, Derek? Different, but that's kind of part of the fun. Aquatic is it's a price point thing. It's like, what can you get for under $2,000? 68% of you guys went with the Matriarch, which is not too crazy when you think about it. So Matriarch, and what that means is, if we look at the bracket here, we are, wait, no, that's totally wrong. That it was the TO5. There we go. So our finalists for best synth analog polysynth under $2,000 is the Artemis and the TO5. Let me just go ahead and drop a poll in the chat. Interesting. I have a feeling I know what you guys are going to go for, but I was wrong already once this stream. 1 minute on the clock. They're both very cool. I was so impressed by the Dreadbox sound when I had Hades in the studio. I was like, man, those guys are making incredible synths. But the TO5 is very good. I actually saw one yesterday at Guitar Center. I was stopping in just because I was nearby, and I saw it, and I was like, wow, it's so small compared to what I'm so used to, these giant boats of vintage synthesizers. 30 seconds left on the clock. Yeah, can I get some scum Oberheims in the chat? I have a feeling. Yeah. Isn't it an aggressive Juno? Well, it's got 2 VCOs, and the Nymphess is kind of like an aggressive Juno. Can I get some scum cheers? There is just the nature of having because the VCF is fixed in Artemis, right? There's just the flexibility of being able to do notches and SEM type stuff. 81% of you guys voted TO5, so that is our winner. The Oberheim TO5 as the best polysynth, analog polysynth under $2,000. So moving right along here, our next category are the high-end hybrid synths under $3,500, with our first matchup being ASM Leviasynth versus Waldorf M. So this is going to be interesting. Of course, you guys will be familiar with this YouTube demoer. The rumors are true. Leviasynth is the brand. Let's see if we can find another. We now have one here that we have in this. That's right, Dr. Synthy Pants. I do want you guys to vote with your hearts. Or Waldorf M. Answer that as soon as the poll's closed. I don't want to poison the well too much. Weird little cut on that video. 70% of you guys said Leviathan, which I am not terribly surprised by. I saw someone in the chat, I think it was Zozilla, said they would have put it up against, let's see here, so Leviathan 1. They would have put up against Iridium, but the thing is Iridium is not a hybrid synth. And the other thing is it's, if you were to go with like Iridium keys, it's much more expensive, really. So it's interesting. Yeah, that is really weird, Keith. All right, going back to the brackets now. Our next battle is between the $2,900 Novation Summit versus for a staggering $3,500. I mean, this is the year of hybrid synthesizers. There's never been a moment in my experience, I think ever, in synthesizer history, where hybrid synthesizers have commanded sort of the top of the market in terms of charging the most. I think we're seeing a shift in what people want out of synthesizers. I think people are getting a little bored with detuning saws and a great sounding analog filter, and they're looking towards these synths that can do these more complex sounds. That is true, Zozilla. The EU Leviathan, for some reason, it is really expensive over there. I don't have a clear answer about that. So let's check out some demos here. This is the Summit. Oh, and to answer your question, Tripwell, yeah, absolutely, I would have gone Leviathan. I'm probably biased because I made some sounds for it. I love that gnat in the corner. Let's jump over to Domino. 42 seconds left on the clock. Interesting kind of lack of a trailer there. 58% of you guys said Summit, which I'm a little surprised by. If you had interviewed me before this, I would have said, oh, for sure, people are going to want the Domino just because it's new and fresh and exciting. But I do think the Summit kind of holds that value. Novation has to be working on something. I tried to get something out of Novation last time we spoke, like, when's the new Summit? You know, because there's got to be something they're working on. You wouldn't need to do too much aside from putting a Poly Aftertouch keyboard into it, right? That's probably all you'd need. But it does sort of feel like, I mean, the synth is 7 years old now, you know, and on the list of all of these, this has got to be one of the oldest synths. For sure. Okay, so Leviathan versus Summit. Wow, I guess it was always going to come down to this, right? It was always going to be this way. So I'm going to put a minute on the clock as soon as I get it in the chat. This one's tough. Leviathan Summit. That's poll is in the chat now. This one's very much like, for one thing, it's kind of crazy that Summit costs more, considering they both have digital oscillators, analog filters, but Leviathan has the Poly Touch keypad plus the ribbon controller. So just right there's something. But I do think the Summit just sounds amazing, and seems to be everyone I've ever known who's had one adores it. And so it's going to be up to you guys. I don't want to... I think there's strong arguments for both. And it's going to be, someone was asking me, I guess I could say who it is. It was my friend Devin from miles away was asking me about Leviathan yesterday and what I thought about it. 10 seconds left, guys, so get your vote in. You know, what do I think about it? And I said, you know, it's so hard because it kind of might be the greatest synth of its type ever of all time, but you have to wait for the glitter crash to end. You know, you have to wait until some time has gone by to really evaluate these things, because it's so excited to get super excited, you know, and it's a new piece of gear, and I'm biased because I designed some of the factory presets, so I'm going to think it sounds great. But, you know, objectively speaking, there is a way in which, like, the Summit is like, it could be one of those reject modernity, embrace tradition things. Wow. And 54% of the chat prefers the Summit. I would not have guessed. So real quick, I want to know what is the thing. So Vincent Presley says sound over specs for me on this one. And I'm going to guess that's what a lot of people are saying. And so I will say this, as one of the guys who did some of the factory presets, I was surprised by the presets they chose of mine. I thought they didn't pick my favorites of what I did. And I think Jexis said something similar in a comment on the ProSynth Network video where he said, hey, you know, they sort of curated a certain sound that they wanted to go with. And I think they went for that ASM sound, right? And I think that might just have kind of given people the wrong impression of the synth to an extent, because it's, I can see why if someone, even if they love their Hydra synth, they're like, well, but I don't want to spend that much more money on a synth if it's going to be basically sound like a Hydra synth still, you know? So Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's pretty crazy that Summit got 54% and went on to still retain the title as best. And at $2,900, that's like, it's gone up by I think $700 since it came out in 2019 or so. So what everyone was sort of saying to an extent is like, look for a synth that it's like worth that inflation. Think about that. Like how cool that is in a way, that this synth has that kind of staying power. The one thing I'll just say, and I'll leave it at this, is I do think better sounds are in Leviathan than people who've only heard the presets have heard so far. I think they made a choice. They really wanted the sounds in Leviathan to be playable, which meant that they kind of leaned into the virtual analog side more than what I think makes it cool, which is the more Prophet VS, more FM synth, like a DX7 Mark II, but with a beautiful analog filter on it. I do think there are better sounds that Leviathan will have. Hopefully there will be some updated banks that come out later that are more like the sounds that I look for too in a synth. I really do think though that when people get their hands on them, because I know the first ones are coming out, are going to be getting into people's hands very soon, that we're going to see other people, not just the sound designers and like Bo Beats, actually play with it, and people will start to see how it really sounds, I think, more than the presets gave it credit for. So now we move on to what will probably be everybody's favorite category, which it's just fun to talk about expensive synths, which is the heavyweight flagships. So these are synthesizers that cost $3,500 and up, which is crazy how many of them there are. Like this is the new world, is expensive polysynths. And I wanted to make sure that the first ones, you have to pick probably like the classic dilemma. When these two synths came out at almost the same time, I feel like the world became so divided on which of these two synths is the one to go for. And so I'm very curious to see what you guys are going to say about them. She can play a synth. I mean, I agree, Keith, for sure. All right, let's jump in to the Polybrew 12. Let's see the demo. I know which of the two I would pick. There's really no question for me. I mean, that, just even that thing, right? All right. 62% of you guys voted for the Polybrute 12, which, you know, I think that's about what the narrative feels like nowadays, where people have become sort of sold on it. So next up, we have another classic sibling rivalry, the Sequential Prophet 10, for $1 cheaper than the Oberheim OBX. So this will be interesting. We're going to my friend Devin over here. Jim's great too. All right, let's see the Oberheim OBX8. More of an ad here. Interesting. Again, I can't say I'm too surprised. I think it's very easy to go with specs, right? So 66% of people said OBX8. And yeah, I mean, it's sort of kind of similar with what Vincent was saying about Leviathan versus Novation. But in that case, people kind of went with the sound, you know, from the... So our next matchup here, Groove Synthesis Third Wave at a staggering $5,000 versus Udo's Super Gemini, also just shy of $5,000. Nothing analog about these oscillators, you know. It's pretty crazy. Where we're at now in terms of price and synths, because I remember when OBX8 came out and I was like, oh, that's ridiculously expensive, but I get it. But there were no synths like that, and now I just feel like every synth costs that much. It is huge sums of money. You can buy a lot of vintage synths for that kind of money. So let's go check out the third wave. Give me one of them scum cheers. Love the Little Shop of Horrors reference there. This might not be the best demo just because of the playing style. It is very close in the chat, so I'm going to let it keep going a bit. Just get your voice, let your voice be heard. Well, that's super cool that the notes are actually laid out on the ribbon controller there. This is as close as it can get, guys. I'm going to give you guys another minute. Oh, it is 50-50 right now. That is crazy. Wow. This is a crazy. We're at 51% right now. And with finally 51% of the vote, that is so crazy. 51% of the vote went with the Super Gemini, which is, you know, the tightest for sure. I wasn't expecting that to be the one that was going to throw everybody. Okay, so we get to finish off this the first round here of the finals with or of the flagships anyways, with the dark horses, the weird choices. We've got the Frap Tools Magnolia coming in at just under 5,000 too, another beige creation. And then the most expensive synth, the Quantum Mark II, which is on sale right now for $6,000, which is kind of crazy when you think about that. That's what that is. This sounds awesome. All right, let's jump into the Quantum. Sure, a lot of you guys are familiar with this since the core of it is not exactly new. Cheers, guys. I agree, Sonic. Maybe one more sound. It looks like the chat's decided. Pretty convincing analog pad down there. Yeah, the price range is just insulting on this one. But it is like a aquatic synth. It's like the one synth that does everything. It's good. It's good. All right. So 57% of you guys went with the Quantum, which I'm not surprised by. But I'm going to be honest with you guys. If I had a choice, I'm going with the Magnolia. I just think the Magnolia sounds really incredible, and that analog filter FM through 0FM is like a revolution in the sense of it's not exactly new, but we're finally seeing it on Polysynths, where with the TO5, I think being the first one that I can think of. And what's going on there is the ability to do cross mod type stuff, but not have to retune your synth. Like, I love the sound of cross mod, but I don't use it a lot because I get pissed off. Just like I have a sound, but it's totally out of tune. Now we are up against this will be interesting. I'm going to give you guys a minute on the clock. Polybrute 12 versus OBX8. Is it modernity or tradition? 1 minute on the clock, you guys. Starting now. This one's, speaking of glitter crash, talk about the Oberheim OBX8. I remember when it came out thinking like there will never be a synth that's as good as this. Modern synth coming out. And there's certainly a contender. There's a bunch of contenders. I mean, look at all the synths we just covered in the bracket. So this is the semifinals, I believe. Yamaha V50, sure. I guess I just mean with the analog side of the world. So this is interesting. 20 seconds left. Let your voice be heard. If you had to say what is the best? Does Polybrute 12 have a multi-mode filter? OBX8 does. It can do notch pad stuff. It's basically got the Matrix 12 filters set up in it. Not all of them though. It doesn't have like phase plus low pass or any of that. That is 1 minute. 62% of you guys went with Polybrute 12. I can see why. I mean, just the Polytouch keybed. The OBX8 might sound better though, but it's up in the air. So we're in the semifinals now. Ooh, this is going to give you guys a run for your money, isn't it? So this is Super Gemini versus Quantum Mark II. Here we go. 1 minute on the clock, you guys. These are two of the craziest hybrid synths ever made, both with polyphonic aftertouch keybeds, both with extremely powerful, versatile engines. I think the Gemini is kind of like your knob per function CS80 with the ribbon controller, and the Quantum has all sorts of stuff. It has granular, it has FM. It can, in a lot of ways, as Aquatic said, it could do everything. For $1,000 difference though, the Quantum is just always felt overpriced, but I guess this is a comparison of, if you could have either, or which do you think is the better one? These are two it's like, these are dream synths. This is like if you ever had one of these synths, it would be pretty incredible. So it's going to be interesting what people are saying. Wow, everybody in the chat saying one thing. They're saying Gemini, but the poll is 53%. So very close again, went for the Quantum. So fascinating. So the continues on. So now we reach the finale of this whole live stream. What is the best heavyweight champion flagship synthesizer? Is it the Polybrute 12 or is it the Quantum Mark II? 1 minute on the chat, guys, starting right now. Cheers. The tension. You could cut the tension with a knife. It's worth saying that, the Polybrute 12, $1,500 is a non-trivial amount of money, considering most of the synths we were looking at were like under $2,000. So the difference there with a Polybrew 12 is you could buy another synth. Oh man, it's pretty crazy. 23 seconds left on the clock. It's going to be interesting. Wow, I am surprised by how much of my audience are ride hard for the Quantum. So I've for a long time in my videos kind of talked shit about the Quantum, but I might have to try and get one day if it is the case. That is the minute up, and the winner of the flagship heavyweight, 57% went for the Quantum. So our Quantum is in fact the final boss of it all. So really incredible when you think about it. The Arturia Polybrew, what is it? The OBX8 and the Super Gemini tied for third place. So they're still doing pretty good. And then not as much love for the Prophet 10, the Muse, the Third Wave as I would have thought. That would not have been my prediction. Noir at Blanc has one and he never uses it. Wow, that's fucked. One thing I can say is, like, with my expensive synths, they are easily the ones that I go to the most, where I'm like, well, if I need a good sound, let's go to the CS70M, you know. So let's recap the brackets tonight. So our first matchup was the PWM versus the Behringer MS5. You guys voted PWM. Then Swifty Edition versus Messenger, which I was shocked that everybody voted for the base station, leaving the PWM Malevolent to be the best budget-friendly analog monosynth under $700 at $549. This is just an incredible instrument. Also something I'd really love to get my hands on. I'll have to reach out to Guitar Center about that. Next up, when we're talking about workhorse polysynths under $1,000, Waldorf Protein versus the Mini Freak. Not surprising that the Mini Freak, which costs $200 more, came out. The Mini Freak is probably the all-time value polysynth. You know, it gives you everything you want. It's got really flexible oscillators and a great filter. The only thing I can say about it is if it's anything like the Micro Freak I tried out, it was Byzantine enough to make it not necessarily great for beginners, which is where I think you want to be with a polysynth. And I didn't feel like the filter was the cat's pajamas. Dub Station, if you're still here, I heard you say earlier you soldiers. I'd be curious to know what you thought. The Behringer Wave beat out the JN80 just barely, which I was also surprised by. But just again, I think that this community is going to prefer synthesizers that can give you some more complexity. I even hate owning a real vintage Juno 6 just because it's so goddamn stupid. You know, like, it's just that it does sound great is the only problem. Next up, Mini Freak versus Multi-Poly. This chat rides hard for the Multi-Poly, not surprisingly. Wave versus Forum. People would prefer the sequential over the Wave. I think when you look at it, it's like, yeah, I could see it. Although I could honestly see an argument for the Wave. Whenever we get into the discussions about Behringer, one thing I'll say is something like a PPG Wave, this has not been cloned even by Waldorf exactly. You know, they could do something like this and they haven't. So it is cool to be able to have an instrument that has that sound. On the counter argument to that, I will say, look at, we've got a fucking telephone number pad in the smallest little display ever. So this has a small display as well, but I guess my point would be, if other companies were going to put out a product with a interface that's as old school as this, they would get lambasted. That's the thing about the modern stuff. So anyways, we finished with the sequential 4M and the multi-poly, and maybe to my surprise again, because I'm a bit of a scum snob. Can I get some scum snobs in the chat? The analog synth did not prevail. It just seems like the multi-poly is the ultimate polysynth under $1,000. Yeah, the Alpha Juno 2, one of my all-time favorites. So jumping into the next category. So these are the contender analog polysynths under $2,000. UBXA versus Artemis. I was actually surprised again that UBXA didn't move on here, because I will say, like, at $1,300, 16 analog voices, polyphonic aftertouch, it's just hard to compete with the value there. And Artemis has been a little divisive too. But overall, people preferred that. I think I would too. I mean, I love Dreadbox. TO5 versus Matriarch. TO5 stomped the Matriarch out. I guess that's not surprising. And then finally, Artemis versus TO5. And again, TO5 went on. If you're looking for an analog synth under $2,000, this is the way to go. If you're looking for an analog synth under $1,000, it might be you're better off getting a virtual analog multi-poly than getting a Forum, I guess, which is super interesting. Now, moving into the high-end hybrid synths, our first matchup was Leviathan versus Waldorf M. And I have to say, Waldorf M sounded good, but Leviathan prevailed. Also, just the features really make it there. I was shocked that Udo Domino was knocked out of the first round. I thought that one was going to take it. I mean, it's interesting how price has been in this, where sometimes you kind of could see, like in the value polysynths category, it kind of went up with the prices. You know what I mean? Like, the more a synth cost in under $1,000, the more features it had. Whereas in this higher end category for hybrid synths, I think with all four of these synths, it's hard to say that any of them are more fully featured. I suppose the Domino has the polyphonic aftertouch, right? That the Novation Summit doesn't. But Summit prevailed. And then we got to Leviathan versus Summit, which I was sure Leviathan was going to win, but no. The tried and true Summit that just sounds so great, so incredible, won out, which is super cool. I was not expecting a synth this old. I wanted to throw a couple of old synths in, like the Summit in the Matriarch. I wanted to throw the Rev 2 in, but price-wise, like, here's the thing, like, when I was coming up with these price points, I did it based off of looking at all of the possible choices from all of the retailers, right? So Sweetwater, Perfect Circuit, Detroit, and Guitar Center. Did I say that already? Sweetwater, Perfect Circuit. Yeah, all of them. I had all of them up on separate screens and going through and trying to price it all out. And I thought, okay, the problem with synths between $2,000 and $3,500 is there basically are only sequential analog synths. It's like the Trigons of the world, the OB6, the Prophet Rev 2 8 voice, I think, is $2,500, and then the 16 voice is $3,000. So sequentials in this weird no man's land middle ground competition in that $1,500 price range. Then you get to $3,500 with the Moog Muse or the sequential Trigon 6, which, I think the Trigon's gotta probably be getting some discounts soon, just because I think anybody who wants that ladder filter sound's probably gonna go for the Muse, not the Trigon. Muse was in the expensive heavyweight flagships. So the first one of those was Muse and Polybrute, and the narrative has moved on to this. Oh, and Hydrasynth just didn't fit in kind of either. Explorer was an option, but I wanted to, Leviathan is what they're focusing on. I could have had Udo's Super 6, right, or Super 8 in this as well, but I kind of tried to focus on what were the new synths from all these companies as well, and then a couple of old ones too. And I think that, there was a while where it was like 50-50 Muse, Polybrute, and I think the world has sort of gone on to, I want to say this was like 62% or so voted Polybrute 12, and that makes sense. Jupiter X was one of those things that I thought I would have on the list at some point. I really hope they come out with a Summit 2 aquatic. I do think that that's possible. Prophet 10, OBX8, not really surprised that the X8 is there. If nothing else, it has stereo outs. The fact that the Prophet 10 does not is kind of crazy to me. Groove Synthesis, third wave. So this one, I thought, if you had asked me who was going to win, I would have thought it was the third wave, the overall flagship. It just does everything and sounds great and is awesome. But the Super Gemini does feel like more of a player's instrument with that poly aftertouch and the ribbon controller that's so cool. And just the immediacy of the slider per function sort of a thing. Then Magnolia versus Quantum. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'd rather have the Magnolia. That thing's super cool and new, unique. I think I'd rather, the only thing I could say is that the filter itself didn't have the charisma of something like the Polybrute 12 or even the Muse or the third wave or the Gemini. Really cool synth. Would be so exciting to have an instrument like that in the studio, I think. But the Quantum, apparently my people are Quantum people. Whether they have one or they have like Iridium Core, which is still like $2,000 fucking dollars. Like I wanted to have it on the list somewhere, but it was just hard to fit in because it's not a hybrid synth. I thought about putting it in the hybrid synth category, but I knew people were already going to be upset with me putting Matriarch in the polysynth category because it's not. But I just, that would be Eternian. That was another one. I didn't have a category for like higher end analog monos. So those synths would have been in there with Pro 3. And then we get to the finale. Or no, actually we don't. We get to Arturia Polybrute versus OBX8. Polybrute came through. Gemini versus Quantum. I don't know which I would prefer. I guess the Quantum is just really good. And then finally we get to Polybrute versus Quantum. Now for me, I think the Polybrute's a little bit more where I'm at. When it comes to the modern stuff, anything that's digital in the oscillator section, it's got to do something for me. And I've never felt like the Quantum filters have filled me with wonder the way the vintage analog synths do. And the Polybrute 12 really feels like a vintage analog synth. But that's the great thing about this, is that there's my choices, but you guys have got to be fucking tired of hearing what I think about synths because you awesome human beings are here every Wednesday. So I wanted to have a sort of a chance for you guys to say what you thought of was what were some good synths. So yeah, it's pretty incredible. I'm surprised the third wave didn't make it too, Mike Moore, but it is what it is. 50,000 subscribers, guys. What an incredible thing. Can I get one more scum chat? Let me hold this so you can see my let me see, can you see that? Jupiter Mining Colony Leopard Lager. If anybody knows the reference, cheers to you. And a huge thank you. Cheers in the chat for 50,000 subscribers. Really just incredible. Thank you. Are there any synths that you think I missed? Should have been on there? I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you. It's fucking cool. It's very cool. But yeah, was there anything big that I missed? I think I pretty much covered most of them. How are you doing, Carl? Happy birthday. CS80 would be interesting. Hydrasynth, yeah. I mean, Hydrasynth was a big omission, but it just kept... I didn't do a digital synth category exactly. And Hydrasynth Explorer... I don't know. I also didn't have like... Minilog XD was a synth I took off the list because I just thought it's great, I honestly, I'm still a Minilog XD guy. Like, if you had to tell me, like, you can only have one really cheap analog synth, I'd probably go Minilog XD because it's got that hybrid oscillator too. You could do fucking physical modeling. You can do all sorts of stuff through that awesome filter. So I still think it's an amazing synth. I just kind of decided for this year's list to kind of dodge that because it's been a while. Yeah, Steam Pipe's another one. Incredible instrument. But just, you know, how do you fit it in? It's not exactly like under $1,000 poly sort of thing. Sari, I think all of them are, well, I mean, it's different hardware too. But to the extent they're all just firmware, because there's not necessarily a lot of, like, there's no analog filters or anything in there. Yeah, K2000 beats all. It's true. It's true. If I had the time, I've still got an Emax that I haven't even shown off on the channel yet. So, hopefully soon I'm going to have my official Best Synths of the Year video up, and I'll be using your guys' votes in tonight's stream to sort of, so you're going to kind of see the same vibe of what happened tonight, except instead of I'll be giving more of my opinions on it, but I'm going to use a lot of the same sound demos and that sort of a thing. I say that to say that if you know, you felt like this was the full meal and you're not hungry for more synth content, you might not, I probably shouldn't say this, but you could probably skip that video, since it will be sort of taking what we did here tonight and using the same bracket, essentially. Like, what you guys voted on is going to be in that video, hopefully. Yeah. So, but with that in mind, thank you guys so much for 50,000 subscribers. It's crazy. Continue to be excellent, and I'll see you guys next week.